Hello there, and welcome back to The Neighborhood, your one-stop shop for unbiased and uninfluenced audio-related content here on YouTube. Thanks to Aima, we're taking a look at their brand new T1 Pro preamplifier. This is a small, budget preamplifier that on one hand appears thought out, and then on the other is a bit of a head-scratcher. Let's get into it. The T1 Pro is a metal chassis preamplifier with multiple inputs and a single RCA output. And by multiple inputs, I put that in air quotes. You see, it has one RCA in and a Bluetooth connection. There's defeatable bass and treble tone controls in the front and a nice solid feeling volume knob. It's generally a very small footprint, particularly due to utilizing an external wall wart for its power. It's also a tube preamplifier, and Aima has included a set of pretty nice GE6186 stock tubes with this unit. But you could experiment with swapping out tubes if you like. From the manual and some brief research, tubes like the 5654, EF96, 6AG5, and 6186 tubes are all interchangeable. But there may be some other tubes out there that will work too. When turned on, these tubes not only glow from their own filament, but also from the blue LED underneath the tube that is associated with each tube socket. To me, this is a bit of an eyesore, and it cheapens the look, and suggests a lower quality product. Generally speaking, I would have liked the T1 Pro more if they would have left the LEDs out or made them defeatable like the tone controls. Notably missing from this preamp is at least one more RCA input and a remote control. I'd pay more to get these features rather than be left without them, and I think most audiophiles would rather have an extra RCA input compared to Bluetooth compatibility if they had to choose between one or the other. Yet Aima chose to provide us with Bluetooth input instead, and a screw-on antenna is included in the box in order to improve range and connectivity. Positively, there's a trigger on the back for use with amplifiers like the Fosi Audio ZA3 that I recently reviewed as well, or Aima's own A70, which I haven't had a chance to look at, but I'm hopeful that Aima will send it in the future. I tested the T1 Pro using the ZA3 and Fosi Audio's new V3 mono blocks, both with dual 48-volt power supplies. The primary speaker that I used was the Wolf One Lagna Serendipity, which is a set of amazing bookshelves with 4 ohms of impedance and 88 dB of sensitivity. I used an Audio-Technica LP7 turntable equipped with a V&M 50SH Simbata stylus on a 500 series Audio-Technica cartridge modified with a Rigby body and a variety of phono stages including a Konus Audio MM500, the Sprout 100, and the JDS Labs PH01. A Konus Audio Digitali DAC and a Goldnote DS10 Plus were also used. What I found was that the T1 Pro is a pretty solid little preamplifier. It's fairly direct sounding, but puts out big images that sound rather large and in charge. The soundstage actually decreased in depth, width, scope, dimension, and separation also lessened compared to just using the Goldnote DS10 Plus as the preamplifier itself. But with the T1 Pro in line, details were more energetic and pushed farther forward, presenting themselves more in front of the listener rather than letting the listener sit back, relax, and observe the sound out in space. With that said, I didn't look at this difference as a problem, as the T1 Pro never really went overboard in its forwardness, even if it was certainly more forward than a signal chain without its influence. Each presentation had its merits, and it would likely be personal preference as to which one would prefer over the other. The T1 Pro is also more energetic and straightforward sounding compared to the Sprout 100, which was more mellow and delicate in the way it displayed sound. As an everyday driver though, I might actually prefer the T1 Pro comparatively, even though it lacked a bit of nuance and sophistication in comparison to the higher priced options that we've already discussed. Overall, the T1 Pro was mostly clean and clear in my testing, and surprisingly so for a tube-influenced preamplifier. With DACs, its background was absurdly black and deadly silent. However, I did have to be a bit careful in its use with phono stages, as the line's grounding had to be rather solid in order not to produce a modulating noise floor. For example, with the JDS Labs PH01, I had to not only ground the phono to the turntable, but also to the DS10 Plus's external PSU-10 EVO power supply. Nevertheless, when proper grounding was achieved, phono noise levels were acceptable for normative moving magnet operation across devices. And while I did experiment with tone controls with the various setups, they generally worked fine, and I preferred to stick with the direct bypass most of the time for the sake of audio purity. All knobs on the T1 Pro have a nice soft click sensation to them, and while I doubt the potentiometer is actually stepped, it gives the illusion that it is, which at least feels nice. The on and off and direct versus tone switches also felt solid, well constructed, and were a pleasure to use. Tonality of the T1 Pro, with its included tubes and stock op amps, felt fairly neutral sounding, and not overly warm or lush. In fact, there was a slight airy and ambient quality to the overall presentation, so if you're expecting an overly tubey sound here, you're not going to get it, at least not with the stock tubes and op amps installed. Across sources and amplification, the general note weight of the T1 Pro was just a touch thicker than it was without it placed in the chain, but instead of overly influencing the sound, the T1 Pro simply bestows a gentle euphonic kiss upon the music. I haven't tested this preamplifier out with different tubes or op amps at this time, but I definitely will in the future to see if I can stretch its already solid performance out a bit further. I'll either add my findings to the description of this review, make a second video, or post my thoughts on www.intuitreviews.com. Compared to some of my other single-ended preamplifier options, such as the Sprout 100 or Goldnote DS10 Plus, the T1 Pro lacked a bit of nuance, spacing, and articulation, but it provided additional energy and directness, which was nice, and I may actually prefer this in certain setups. In my small listening room, I might actually be willing to accept these trade-offs for what the T1 Pro offers instead. But then again, your preference may vary. Bluetooth use was notably drier and somewhat flatter sounding than its use with its other input, but overall, as I listen every now and then, it might be a nice option. For critical listening though, I would certainly recommend using other options, even for Bluetooth. For this reason, in future iterations of this product, I'd like to see Aiyama drop the Bluetooth functionality and add a second RCA input. Although it technically has two inputs, it doesn't really feel like a real preamplifier without at least another true secondary line input. Its particular subwoofer output is also an odd choice in my opinion. Because it uses a 3.5mm output rather than an RCA output, you're going to need to use a unique cable or adapter to use it appropriately. I would have preferred it if Aiyama simply provided a solitary RCA output for subwoofer use with a traditional powered subwoofer cable. But on the other hand, I suppose that the 3.5mm output is truly stereo for those that are worried about that. In summary, I wouldn't have made some of the choices that Aiyama has with the build of this preamplifier. To start with, I would have just skipped the Bluetooth and provided a secondary RCA input instead. I would have also included a more traditional RCA output for the subwoofer, and I think remote functionality would drastically improve its use case, making it an available option for those that want to place this unit outside of arm's reach. I also might have considered making the tubes defeatable in the circuit if this would have been possible and sounded good as well. Being able to restrict the influence of the tube in the circuit may have lessened the noise issues that I encountered without double grounding my turntable. Nevertheless, I do like that the T1 Pro provides functionality for interchangeable op amps and a variety of affordable tubes, and it generally sounds very good without overly influencing the sound. I'll likely experiment with different op amps and tubes with this unit in the future, so make sure that you're subscribed with notifications turned on in order to get alerted to future videos and content from me. You can also keep up with the channel at all its other locations, such as Instagram, X, Discord, Patreon, or www.intuitreviews.com. Links to these locations will be provided in the description below. But to close out this review, for the most part, other than some head scratchers with the build, there's a lot to like here with the Aiyama T1 Pro, and it's certainly good value as a budget tube preamplifier for its price under $100. And with that, I'm out for now.